Here we go, this Max Olson segment on Thursdays, usually right around 4 o'clock. He joins Craig Paul, and I'm David Smoak. Max, I've already seen the responses, the stories. They are part of the athletic.com on UT, the preseason poll with the Big 12. Your thoughts about what you saw as it was released?
Yeah, wasn't shocked that it was Texas. I did not, full disclosure, have a vote in this, so I ballot together on this one, but wasn't shocked it was that it was Texas just based on kind of the name recognition of the players they've got coming back, and obviously we saw that yesterday with the all Big 12 team. I thought the sorting on really 1 through 5 is definitely 1 through 6 is definitely interesting though. I mean, I think you can make an argument that Texas Tech should be higher than Oklahoma. You can certainly make an argument that we're sleeping on TCU even with what they with losing 8 NFL players off last year's team. And honestly, fellas, based on the Big 12 we've watched every year, if I told you like the Big 12 title game is going to be like Texas Tech versus Kansas, you'd probably say like, that's possible, I guess, right? I mean, it's hard to know what to make of these new teams, and obviously like there's probably going to be some sleepers in this this kind of like 5 to 10 range that have really good years.
Oklahoma State got a first-place vote from someone who's very confident in Mike Gundy, and look, he's got the track record. But is this kind of the height of the weeds that Gundy likes to lay in and let people doubt him that he's got a middle-of-the-pack team?
Yeah, I think so. That they feel like certainly there's a lot of things that have to come together for this team, but I know they feel pretty good about Alan Bowman coming in from Michigan. I think they feel pretty good about the transfer portal haul that they had to replace, what they lost. There was obviously a lot of attention on some of the guys that they lost this offseason, but I think they did a pretty good job of replacing them. And, really the X factor here is going to be Brian Nardo, the new defensive coordinator from Gannon University. And, he's really trying to implement an Iowa State-style odd-front defense. Do you have the personnel for that? Do you get enough reps in the off season and in September to really build a really solid defense for Big 12 play? I think that's going to be the challenge. But I think Oklahoma State will be right in the mix here, just as they were middle of last season before all the injuries they had.
Max, do you think people have a hard time trying to figure out Baylor this year and the way the last couple of years have gone from the highs of Big 12 title, Sugar Bowl a couple years ago to just whatever that was all out of whack last year? They haven't shown to be a top-level team in the last, based on last season, and there's a lot of question marks. I feel like they're one of those teams, kind of like maybe in Oklahoma State, that it's just kind of hard to peg them right now. How about you?
Yeah, I think that feels right. I mean, were there any Baylor players that you guys were like dead set on, like, wow, they should have been on the All Big 12 team yesterday?
No. Yeah.
I think that doesn't mean they don't have players that can help them compete for conference title or anything like that. It's just with some of these teams, you kind of go down the lineup and you're like, okay, it's a bit more unproven going into this year, and you've got a lot to kind of figure out. And yeah, I think that there's, it's kind of the nature of the beast with the schedule that these teams play in this conference, that you're going to end up in a lot of close games, and somebody has to lose those close games. But yeah, you're right. I don't think that, especially considering at this time last year, we were talking about Baylor number 1 on this list. It certainly doesn't seem like they're getting kind of like the same kind of like scrutiny in a positive way this offseason in terms of what they're bringing back.
Max, this is a fair question, and it's one that I ask myself. How much different would the media poll be if the Texas players and team roster coach had a West Virginia or maybe a UCF jersey on?
Well, did people, like, the year that West Virginia was loaded with Will Grier, I think people still voted them pretty high, right? Second or third or something like that. I mean, the funny thing is that Texas is not, we've always put Oklahoma at the top of this, like by default. And part of it is because they won 6 Big 12 titles in a row. But I mean, Texas has not been number 1 in this thing since they were voted first in the 2009 poll. And that year they actually, played for a national championship. So good call by the people that voted on that one. Of course, I was a young child at that point in time, right? But, I think there's a, sure, there's there's always like a real skepticism here when kind of Texas automatically gets slotted into a preseason top 25, just based on the recruiting rankings and things like that. But I don't know, guys. Like you go through the roster there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they legitimately do have like 15 returning starters from last year's team. I mean, I understand it's you can point to Sark's resume, you can point to how much Texas has overpromised and underdelivered in terms of the talent they've had over the past decade. But this is kind of one of those years where, like, gosh, there's really kind of, especially in the last year in the Big 12, there's really no excuses. Like, any game they lose besides Alabama, like, there's like not going to be a lot of patience for, I don't think. Like, I think this is a team that it's got to be Big 12 title game or bust.
Yeah, Max, I have a hard time seeing them finishing, less than 10-2. Honestly, 9-3, I guess, would be the floor for them. So that may not get them in the top 4 of the CFP, but that certainly probably this year for sure, especially if one of those losses is to Bama, puts them in the Big 12 title game.
Yeah, and, look, there's a lot of – I mean, even with Texas, there's a lot of stuff that has to go right. I mean, certainly Quinn Ewers has to play his ass off for Texas to be playing for a Big 12 title. And, he's still a young guy who I think – is going to show a lot of progress from last year. Certainly, the combination of Bijan and Roschon was really special, and there are talented players in that running back room, but you got to find, the right balance there and a workhorse and all of that. I mean, there's still pieces of this that are unproven, but I think the continuity they've had overall as a staff and the ability to, add some pretty good players via the portal to maybe improve some of these positions where they're a little bit lighter. Like, I think from a roster building standpoint, it's hard to knock what they've done so far. Now they got to actually go out and win with it.
We just had somebody bring this up a couple minutes ago, or a few minutes ago, but West Virginia dead last. Okay, that's fine, but that's behind all 4 new schools. Is that a severe level of disrespect, or do you think that's about right, actually?
I don't think it's right. No, I don't think West Virginia is the worst roster or worst, starting 22 or however you want to judge this stuff of the 14 schools. I think that there's, I think it's just going to be a real thing, and I'm not knocking the newcomers, but ultimately, and I've had this conversation with Dan Holgerson before, who's about to go through this again. He learned this when he went from the Big East to the Big 12 at West Virginia. You can be very successful in the league that they were coming from if you've got a pretty strong starting lineup, and it's a real star, a couple NFL players. I think to be successful in the Big 12, you really do need like 40 plus really good players. I think that's what it's going to take, and so it's going to take from a long term standpoint for Cincinnati, who's rebuilding with a new staff, for the rest. I mean, for BYU, for Houston, for UCF, like, I think it's going to take time to build up a program that can really contend. And so I'd be kind of inclined to slot them towards the bottom. And I think West Virginia figured some stuff out at the end of last season. And, obviously real question marks and a legitimate, hot seat situation there. But I wouldn't just assume West Virginia is worse than that.
Last thing, Max, and maybe still have a couple more questions left, but you wrote the article in late May about Matt Campbell and how excruciating it was in 2022. Quote, it was gut-wrenching in every way, shape, and form, unchanging, trying to figure out, right, what he was doing after he was basically the golden child. And the last couple of years have been disappointing. People still feel like they're going to be in that maybe at the bottom, like 10, 9, 8, 11, whatever. How much did last year eat at him?
Oh yeah, I mean, Iowa State. It's been nothing but positivity in Ames, Iowa, from the start with the Matt Campbell era. I mean, this is a staff and a team, the teams they built that have achieved so many firsts in that program, and you have to kind of keep that perspective. But certainly last year, I mean, they start 3-0, they finally beat Iowa, and then the wheels totally fall off. I mean, they had more injuries than they've ever had before. Certainly the quarterback play in going from Brock Purdy to Hunter Deckers wasn't up to the standard. They had no run game. Defensively, they were one of the best in the conference and one of the best in the country, and just offensively couldn't get it going at all. I think there's real optimism that they've got someone really special in Nate Shieldhouse to run the offense now. He's been on this staff for a while, coached the running backs and the receivers, and is now coaching the quarterbacks. and I really think is a future star in the business. And so I think they feel really good about that. They overhauled the offensive staff quite a bit, and I think they feel like they absolutely love the freshman class they brought in. I think they're going to be playing a lot of young guys this year. So yeah, I was curious to see where Iowa State got slotted in this, but I think it's going to be this is probably more of a grow year than a contending kind of year. But man, I think they're heading in the right direction from losing a bunch of really talented, like, best players they've ever had. They've got to develop a new crop of those guys, but I think they feel pretty good about where they're heading again.
Max, Greg, thank you very much for your time. Hope you enjoyed your vacation. Get yourself back to work, and let's get going.
I'm going to see you next week.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
You will. We'll be right there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, on Wednesday and Thursday. Look forward to seeing Max Olson along with everybody. Yes, sir. Thank you, Max. Appreciate your time. David Williams.